Good morning, everyone. I'm Alan Joins, Mayor of Winston-Salem, and thank you all for coming out today as we give our annual State of the Community report to the citizens. Oh, it's ominous, but there's a Bible up here on the podium, so I think, Dee Dee, do you want me to swear in or something? I think it's very appropriate that the city government pause at least once a year and report to the citizens on what has happened and what the state of our community is. You know, for our city, this has been a year defined by the power of the united community that is linked with a clear mission of a strong economy that benefits all of our people. It's propelled by a fierce devotion to public service, reducing poverty, addressing gun violence, creating affordable housing, and growing the economy. I'm so thrilled that we got a number of our council members. Mayor Pro Tem Adams is here, Councilmember Burke, Councilmember McIntosh, and Councilmember Larson is here. I think that's all that I saw. A number of members of the senior city staffs here and others, and I'm very grateful that you're here. Well, we have to acknowledge starting out that our old nemesis, COVID, is still with us after almost 3 years. You might recall that I put a stay-at-home order in place back in March of 2020 after Jeff Lindsay called me that morning and said, Mayor, if you don't do something, people are going to die. And so I got that message, Jeff, and we took some things. It was in place for a few months, and then the governor put one statewide, and it stayed there for a while as well. And say right now that all the state of emergencies have been lifted, not only here but across the state. But I think we should also pause and just remember that we lost 958 people in Forsyth County dying from COVID. So it's a serious situation, but we're sort of beginning to learn to live with it, much like the flu. Well, let's talk about something more fun, more interesting, and that is jobs and economic development. Certainly keeping our economy healthy has been one of my top priorities and one of the priorities of our city council and the city government per se, particularly coming out of the COVID downturn. Right before COVID, our job generation at 3.9% new job generation was the highest of any of the metro areas in the Southeast. That fell way off, but we're coming out of the COVID. We're back up now to a little over 2% annual net new job growth, which is not where we were, but we're moving in the right direction. Last year alone, economic development recruitment, Mark Owens is here and others, we created 1,019 new jobs and over $118 million of investment. We ended the year last year with a 3.3% unemployment rate, and we were really thrilled that our labor force grew by 2.3%. We ended the year with 3 very exciting projects, and we just had a groundbreaking last week for one of those for the Seal Abig German company that's going to be here investing $100 million and creating 600 jobs initially, perhaps growing to 800 jobs there. Krispy Kreme, Councilmember Burke and her ward chose to do an expansion right here in Winston-Salem of their operations hub. It'll retain 47 jobs and create another 187 new jobs and invest $20 million right in the heart of our East Winston community. One of the few projects that we've seen in many years right in East Winston. We're thrilled about that. And then finally, Caftech, a technology-related packaging company, is coming into Innovation Quarter with about 90 jobs and $2 million of investment. The Chamber was able to document that last year there were 75 new scalable companies that started in our city. We hit Mark Owens with a goal of 50 scalable companies a year, and he exceeded it last year, so hope that continues, Mark. I want to recognize Mark and Laura Lee and Calvin and other members of the Greater Winston-Salem staff for their stellar work in bringing jobs and investments to our community. I also want to congratulate Bob Leake and the folks at the Whitaker Park Development Authority for their work in successfully getting redeveloped or renovated the entire 1.7 million square feet of space at Whitaker Park. That property and buildings that was donated by R.J. Reynolds several years ago. That building is either underway or has been sold to companies like Cook Medical. I saw Scott here. Nature's Values and Food Bank and other companies will be going in there. And in addition to getting the area redeveloped, the net proceeds from the development activities will go into an economic development fund that will allow us to help other projects going forward, $12 million. Mayor Pro Tem Adams and I serve on that board, so we're thrilled with the fact that we're able to provide some money to help out. And matter of fact, we used a little bit of that money to make the Krispy Kreme project go forward. We needed to close a little bit of a gap. Certainly regionally, we've been keeping up with a lot of great announcements with Toyota Battery, with other automobile manufacturing facility and other projects. And Winston-Salem is in a very sweet spot with regards to being suppliers. These suppliers don't want to be right next to the plant because they'd have to go after the same labor force that the plant's going after. So they want to be within about 30 miles, no more than 60. So we're in a very good spot to attract suppliers. I know Mark's got a specific strategy working on that piece of it. The Boom, a supersonic aircraft manufacturing facility at Piedmont Triad Airport, will create over 1,700 jobs close to us. You know, it's 25 minutes to the airport from here. We had a groundbreaking on that on January 25th, and that project has the potential of $32 billion with a B dollar impact on our region. And speaking of booming, Jason Thiel just walked in, and so we've got the downtown area continues to grow. Over 1,000 new residential units were developed over the last 3 years, and Jason tells me that we'll have soon over 5,000 people living in downtown. Can you imagine that? Years ago, we said you could shoot a cannon down 4th Street at 5 and not hit anybody. Today, it's a different story, isn't it? So obviously, this 5,000 people will continue to support our over 100 restaurants and bars located in the downtown area. And I'm thrilled that Jason and his team are putting together a new strategic plan for downtown that will take us forward over the next 10 years to make sure we're keeping that going. Relative to innovation and entrepreneurship, we are, of course, the city of the arts and innovation. I think we can rightfully claim that title. Matter of fact, the Business North Carolina recently did a story that said that Winston-Salem has becoming a, quote, potent innovation hub. I believe that's very easily validated. We take a look at the infrastructure that we've created here over the past several years. Winston Starts, for instance, has 36 companies operating in that very fertile environment there, receiving space, mentoring, and in some cases, financial assistance. The Flywheel operation continues to provide early startup space. The Creative Economies program has successfully launched over 40 companies, and the good news is 87% of them are still active, having raised some $3.8 million of additional capital. We carried out the first Winston Venture Grants program. Last year, we sent out RFPs all across the country saying, look, if you got a technology company that's getting started or just in the next phase of growing, if you'll move that to Winston-Salem for a year, we'll provide you $50,000, free space, and mentoring. Didn't know what kind of response we get, but we got responses from all 50 states and a few countries. So that large number of potential companies were vetted down, and eventually we chose 9 companies, 3 of which were here in Winston-Salem, which is good. We want to support our local folks, and 6 companies coming from outside. They all moved their headquarters here. That first year is now over, and great traction was achieved. Looks like, of course, with 3 that was already here will stay, but then the 3 of the new companies that moved in will stay as well. So it's a net gain of 3 companies for us there. The Institute for Regenerative Medicine, Dr. Atala, has created a RegenMed hub as a way to facilitate companies and programs aligning with the amazing research that they're doing there at the Regenerative Medicine Center there. I read recently that Dr. Atala has created space for these small companies and 2 accelerators actually, and all the space in there has already been taken up, and they're moving forward with additional space as well. The Innovation Quarter itself is going strong. There's over 115 companies and institutions there involving $872 million of investment that has occurred since the beginning there. Got 4,500 employees working there, 2 million square feet in the first phase. Phase 2, which is getting ready to crank up with some major investments there, Big I Institute and others, is slated to be another 2.4 million square feet of space when that's fully developed. I do want to mention a program that's probably not got a lot of attention. It's called the Nordic Amplify program. I don't know if you've heard about that or not, but it's an initiative to attract biotech companies from 5 Nordic companies of Finland, Denmark, Sweden, Iceland, and Norway come here. And what we said to them is that you want to enter the U.S. market with your medical product or device, you could probably do it a little easier here working with wonderful medical centers like Novant and Atrium. so that you can tie in. And by the way, Jeff, they just thank you for hosting those folks and helping them feel really good. Good news about it, we had 14 companies come here last year that's wanting to sell their product to folks like Novon and Atrium. And I know of one that's already established a presence here, a company from Finland. Maybe more has happened since there's another, Mark saying there's been more. Our venture capital funds are operating strongly. The Winston-Salem Partners Round Table, which we call Whisper, has already done 6 grants this year, totaling $1.5 million. And the larger funds, such as the Venture South, First Launch, and others are progressing as well. Relative to East Winston development, there's been a number of initiatives in that regard. I just mentioned the Krispy Kreme one that's going forward. There are a number of new housing projects that we'll talk about in a little bit more detail in just a moment. There's the discussions underway right now for a new office building just right there on Martin Luther King. Hopefully we can make that happen this year. A program called Winston-Salem Rise began 2 years ago and is intended to break down barriers to wealth building in East Winston. And this initiative just received a $281,000 grant for the Kate B. Reynolds Trust to assist that program going forward. Councilmember Scipio is not here, but no, she is back here. Sorry, Councilmember Scipio. I'm going to mention the fact that the Dreamland Park and Columbia Heights areas, new plans for that have been approved by the City Council as a guide for that. And our small business loan program, Ken, loan portfolio is made up of approximately 80% minority companies there. Affordable housing and poverty reduction. Marlon Newman's here on the front row. We've identified about 3 years ago now, a need for 16,000 new units in our community over the 10 years at that time, now about 8 years going forward. In response to that, we created the Affordable Housing Coalition to give us recommendations on how to address that. And since that time, we've taken a number of steps to move forward. For instance, I asked the City Council, and they unanimously approved setting aside $30 million of our ARPA, American Rescue Plan funds, as well as some state dollars to be used exclusively for affordable housing, and to set a goal for ourselves of 750 units per year for the next 10 years. We also created a dashboard that we get quarterly on how we're doing. Last year, we created 450 new units. Didn't quite hit the goal with 750, but I feel pretty good about that as a great start going forward. Last year, we purchased 3 parcels of land that we'll be now looking to work with developers to redevelop. And actually, we just approved one yesterday, I believe, Marla, to get that going. We've approved funding to work with a nonprofit group that will be taking over an old motel and turning it into 100 housing units for permanent supportive housing. We broke ground on the first program in the Choice Neighborhoods project, which will totally create about 406 units. You might recall this was a $30 million grant that the City of Winston-Salem got to redo the Cleveland Avenue neighborhood, one of only 4 such grants in the U.S. that year. United Metropolitan Baptist Church, Joe Crocker, is doing a huge project just across 52 there to provide 324 units as well. City Council and the Housing Committee moved forward with some major changes to our auxiliary dwelling unit ordinance to make it much easier to create residential units near your house, over your garage, in your basement, whatever it might be. So that's going to be another way as well. Creating new units, of course, is vital and is very important, but equally important is keeping those individuals in their apartments so they don't get displaced and become homeless or things of that nature. Well, the City of Winston-Salem operated a very successful program to provide rental assistance, or really you could call it eviction prevention, from a grant from the federal government. We expended $11.7 million and were able to help 2,595 households stay in their apartments or their houses. And we were recognized by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development as having one of the best programs in the country. And I want to congratulate Marlon Newman and her staff for that work and making that happen there. In terms of poverty reduction, and Paula McCoy just walked in there with our partnerships, our Prosperities program. We're beginning to get some traction, regain some traction would be a better word, coming out of COVID, because we saw a major impact on poverty in our community because of that. But we will say that the rate's going in the right direction. We've seen it drop from 26% to 19%, which is still way too high. It means almost 1 out of 5 of our citizens living at below the poverty level, but we're moving in the right directions. And we're planting a lot of seeds that will take some long-term impact as going well. For instance, our free college program that we announced 3 years ago, which an individual coming out of Forsyth County High School can go to Forsyth Tech absolutely free. Tuition, books, fees, child care, transportation if needed. And last year, listen to this, we had 449 young people took advantage of that program. And since we began, over 1,000 young people have taken advantage of it. And just think about their future is going to be so much more brighter going forward. The good jobs they're going to potentially be able to get, or maybe even move on and finish their degree at a 4-year institution. I believe that dignity is really given to a person when he or she gets a good job. We created a paid internship program for 11th and 12th graders for disadvantaged families. It's called Aspire. Again, our good folks at Greater Winston-Salem, Inc. is running that program. Last year, we had 86 young people participate. Mark tells me we could do double that many if we had more companies that would participate. So really hope some companies will step up and participate with us. But these young people get paid $15 an hour for 10 hours a week. But hopefully, they'll kind of create something in their mind looking for a new job career going forward. The third grade reading initiative that's being operated by our school system, which would bring our third graders reading up at grade level, 90% of them by the year 2025. Very ambitious goal, but Superintendent McManus has showed us how she's planning on doing it and is doing it there. And we're continuing to work on a number of other ways in our Pathways for Prosperity program that includes there. Many of the 56 recommendations in that plan are being worked on, Paula and her team. So transportation, I didn't think I'd ever be able to say this. The eastern leg of the Beltway is just about finished. In fact, within a matter of a couple of months, be able to get on that Beltway down at Salem Parkway and go all the way to US up 52 to King without getting on US 52. And then the other two segments from Salem Parkway South to Interstate 40 and 311, both are under construction. So in a matter of 2 years, this whole division will be done. And the western leg is fully funded. So there'll be a while before it's done, of course, but at least it's funded there. The recreation and tourism part of our economy and our city, we having a good year there. We saw the return of the National Black Theater Festival after a couple of years hiatus. Great festival, came on strong, had good outturns for that. We also saw a very successful River Run International Film Festival, the Bookmarks Festival, Winston-Salem Fashion Week, Gears and Guitars, and the Fiesta program all made strong returns to our community. Relative to our own recreation, we added or renovated a number of recreational facilities last year. Nelson Malloy Park up in the North Ward opened last year, and it's the first park in our system that's designed specifically for persons with disabilities. $4.3 million was expended on expanding our greenway system. The second phase of the Quarry Park, a wonderful facility, is now underway with adding some new amenities to that. $9.6 million in renovations and expansions was made at Winston Lake Park. And if you hadn't seen that, it is a beautiful addition to that wonderful lake over there. And $1.5 million to the golf course there. So doing some great work there. And then we worked on 8 other parks around the city to either expand or renovate them. Sustainability, Kevin Mundy. Are you waiting for that one, right? The city remains committed to our goal of reducing our carbon emissions by 50% by the year 2030 and total elimination of carbon by 2050. We already have a fleet of hybrid buses running. We just bought some additional hybrid trucks, and we held off on buying some pickups until next year so we can purchase electric vehicles. And Councilmember Mundy, thank you for your pushing hard on that piece of it going well. In fact, I'm very proud to say that right now, 37% of our rolling stock, there are 550 of those, 37% are alternative fuel vehicles. And I'll say there's going to be some monies available, hoping that we can go after and help us take our plan forward. $370 billion in federal funding is available from the Inflation Reduction Act, and a lot of that's available to cities and counties to work on it. Relative to city finances, we adopted a very aggressive budget last year that allowed us to raise our salaries of our public safety employees by 14% and adjusted several other jobs within our city to keep them on par with other cities in the triad, and hopefully will help us reduce our vacancy rate. Right now, we have 421 full-time positions vacant within the city. That's 17% of our workforce. In the police department, Chief, by the way, Chief William Penn is here, our new chief, gets sworn in right here this afternoon, so we're looking forward to that. There's 158 sworn positions vacant in our police department with a vacancy rate of 29%. Very difficult, and it's really hampered us in our ability to carry out the functions that we want to do. Relative to capital projects, we've got a huge backlog of those that's really been hampered by our inability to get the planning and design work done because of vacancies in engineering and other areas like that. But the City Council now will be holding a work session on the 27th of February to look at this backlog and try to come up with a strategy to get them moving, pick out the priorities that we want to get done as quickly. The ARPA funds, as you know, we got $52.8 million of funds from the federal government. Scott Tash and his staff worked hard to make sure that was used in a variety of ways. A lot of guidelines on that, a lot of guidelines that have to be encumbered by the year 2024 and spent by the year 2026. So we set aside $23.7 million for affordable housing. We set aside and spent $10.5 million for what we're calling transitional grants to local nonprofits, and many of y'all in here probably got some of that. We did use $5.6 million to replenish some of our city funds that we had to pull out of our budget to balance our budget back in the 2021 time frame, and then numerous other ways we use that money. Leaf collection. I don't believe there's anybody in this room, be it an elected official, city staff, or you, that's happy, and Johnny Taylor in particular, about how it went this year. I think there was almost a perfect storm of things that happened was working against us in terms of negative impact that affected our leaf collection this year. First of all, the leaves all tended to come down at one time. You know, sometimes it's a little bit more incremental with the poplars coming first and then the maples and the oaks. It's like they all came down at one time. Then we had a bunch of rain right on top of that. We also have a quadrant system where we rotate 4 quadrants of the city. This year we started a different quadrant every year. So this year we started at a particular quadrant, which meant that by the time we got to that 4th quadrant, the 4th quadrant was actually the area that traditionally generates the most leaves. So we were behind when we got there. And then to make matters even worse, we had some huge supply chain issues keeping our equipment going. And sometimes we had less than 50% of our trucks running, but we're back up now and we're about to get it done. We've got some ideas, Johnny's got some ideas for next year that we'll talk about in just a moment, but I want to say that we, the city, know that this is not a good year for leaf pickup. We're going to do a lot better job next year. In terms of recycling, we made a commitment to bring recycling in-house. We'll be doing it with our own troops. After March 31st, we believe we'll be able to do higher customer service and result in cost savings to our city. The Weaver fire. Huge issue on our last year. We just commemorated the 1-year anniversary of that on January 31st. And as you might recall, this huge fire had the potential for creating the largest, if not one of the largest explosions in the history of the United States, according to our fire chief, Trey Mayo. But because of the professionalism and the great effective leadership of the fire department and the absolute bravery of the men and women who fought that fire, we were able to avert a catastrophe. Chief, thank you for the great work that went on there. We were also able to reimburse citizens who suffered financial losses when we asked them to evacuate the area for several days. And Greater Winston-Salem, Inc. was able to provide some dollars to small businesses in the area that had losses as well. As a result, I asked Councilmember Jeff McIntosh, the chairman of our Public Works Committee, to chair a group to look at our zoning laws, building codes, and things of that nature that we might be able to do some changes with to make sure we're taking every step that we can to avoid a situation like that. And Jeff's committee just made some recommendations to the City Council, and we just recently redone our zoning codes to ordinances to make some changes there. But I will say, we've probably done about all we can do as a local city government, but there are other things that need to be done that will require state approval going forward. And then finally, gun violence. This is an area that's on everybody's mind in Winston-Salem, Raleigh, Charlotte, Greensboro, across the country. It's an issue facing our country. We were feeling pretty good last year. We saw a 25% reduction in homicides. And then we kicked this year off, and we've already had 11 homicides compared to 8 during the same time last year. I think it's important to note that the victims generally knew the assailant in that particular case, so it's not random acts of violence. And our police department is working very, very hard. Our new chief, William Penn, has indicated this will be one of his top priorities. Our police department already has a gang reduction task force. It has a violent crime task force. There's a citizen group working as part of a gang reduction steering committee, whose objective is to keep young people out of the gangs, or maybe rescue young people from the gangs and keeping it a straight thing. The police department is using amazing new technology to address these issues. I don't know if you've had a chance to see the real-time crime center. It's an amazing facility there, tying into hundreds of cameras across the city that gives real-time information. We have our shot spotter system that triangulates a gunshot going off and gives it real-time information to the police. We joined the Triad Ballistics Network to share information gathered at crime scenes, and that results of that has already resulted in a number of cases being solved because of that. But we've all said this, that you can't police your way out of this situation. There must be a community-wide effort to work on this. For instance, our police foundation has started a number of after-school and summer athletic programs to give our young people alternatives. Programs in churches, such as the Sunday school at Union Baptist, where have the kids and their parents taking some classes on Sunday morning that will bring that together. Really excited about the CURE program that's getting ready to crank up. We provided funds for that from the city's budget. What we were doing is hiring counselors to go into hot spots around the city, sitting down with young people and others to say, hey, there are alternatives to dealing with anger or conflict rather than violence. And so I think that's going to provide good dividends for us going forward. We started the BEAR program this year, which is the Behavioral Evaluation and Response Team, which will send mental health professionals to calls where it's obvious that a mental health professional is needed in those situations. This past year, we did receive some nice accolades. Wallet Hub magazine ranked us #1 in the country for small business growth. Zen Business ranked us as #4 best city to start a small business. We were ranked as the #2 most affordable metro area in the country by the Bureau of Economic Analysis. And Southern Living said we had the 18th best college town in the South. So lots happened in 2022. Let's look for just a quick moment about what we're going to focus on 2023. Reducing gun violence. Certainly got to stay right at the top of our list there. I want us to explore more ways of getting social programs, funding for social programs such as CURE and others that will get at the root of the violence. Also, I want us to add to a new technology or any additional technology at the police department. And Chief, I understand that the Department of Justice has quite a bit of funds available, and we need to go after that hard. Marla, we're going to continue to push hard on development of affordable units and workplace units, creating that 750 goal this year. We're going to be aggressive in obtaining federal funds for our sustainability programs. There's $370 billion available in the Inflation Reduction Act that we should be aggressive in going after. We're going to continue our aggressive economic development program with special attention to development within our East Winston community to replace jobs that have been lost due to companies moving out, downsizing, or just going out of business. Of course, as a city council, we've got to hire a new city manager this spring to replace retiring manager Lee Garrity, and certainly I want to thank Lee for his 32 years of service to our community, including 17 years as a city manager. Provided strong, innovative leadership over those years. We're going to develop a new program and protocol for leaf pickup, which will, and Johnny, correct me if I get anything wrong here, we're going to add 2 new automated side loaders to our crews. We're going to change the process by beginning the leaf season with leaf collection in all 4 quadrants at one time. So we'll get started early. We may actually start collection a little bit early this year. And we want to better coordinate brush collection, leaf collection, and street sweeping so that we're not kind of running over each other and making sure that's being very coordinated. So I'm feeling good about that. We're going to do. Chief, you're going to open new Station 13, which is our 20th station, by the way. It's a great new facility over there, and we're working with the state government for some funded for the equipment for that. We want to adopt, Scott, a sound budget that keeps rates low and allows us to retain our AAA credit rating, which is the highest you can get. And we're one of probably 20 cities, 27 cities around that can enjoy AAA grading by all 3 of the rating agencies. So in summary, I'd say our city's in a strong financial position. We have programs in place to address housing. We have an effective economic development program, but we've got to deal with gun violence. We've got to ramp up our sustainability efforts there. We've got to continue pushing on that housing. But we're well positioned to do all those if we remain unified. And that's the key to it, working together, city working with the county, working with Greater Winston-Salem, working with the private sector and others, we can get things done. Thank you all very much for being with us today. And that's our State of the Community report for this year. Thank you. Recognize Councilmember Kevin Mundy, who came in